Look at that. You've heard me talk for 9 minutes and now you can see my shining face in blonde. Today I'm brunette. At that time I was blonde. You never know what you're gonna get. I am Stephen Harrington Dakota. I am a certified insurance counselor. I work with agency performance partners, but like you, I was on the agency side for 22 years, used HawkSoft since 2008, and I love workflows and processes. So I get invited from time to time to share my love and knowledge of HawkSoft with y'all, and I'm very excited to be here. If you have questions after the meeting, you can always reach out to me. That's Stephen with a PH, not PHTEPHEN. That's STEPHEN. Sometimes when you say Stephen with the PH, the lovely baristas at Starbucks will put PHTEPHEN because they think the S is silent and it's really a PH. I don't know. Just clearing up any confusion there. Stephen at agencyperformancepartners.com. And I'm happy to respond. I also have to give a shout out to the reason that I work hard and travel every day, and that's Miss Tina Athena, Christina Sabrina Harrington Dakota. She's also an agency best friend, and she's my best friend. She's the only one that's happy to see me no matter what, any time of day or night. So she is my reason for being, Tina Athena Sabrina Christina. That also spells task, kind of tax, TACF. Anyways, it was a weird joke we had the other day, but here she is, Tina Athena Sabrina Christina, with her one ear that stands up and she says, hello. So we are going to talk today about sales processes and reporting. I'm going to do an overview of customizing source, status, and suspense categories. We're going to go a little quick through that, so just make sure you're paying some attention. The full guide and resource will be available later, but some of us know how to customize source, status, and suspense categories, and some of us don't. So we want to keep it a moderate pace for everyone. We're then going to review the sales and retention section in HawkSoft, including cross-sell opportunities. We're going to look at tracking the sales pipeline, and we're going to look at agency intelligent reports so we can track some retention and production numbers. Are you ready? I'm ready. Hello. So with that, we begin. How do we customize source, status, and suspenses? We go to the toolbar and we select, guess what, guys? We select customize list. Imagine that. So I'm going to switch back and forth and bounce around a little bit just to make sure you are getting the best experience as well. I know you love to see it live in HawkSoft. So if I click on the little wheel or the cog and I click on customize list, here is all the lists that I have access to customize. What we're going to be looking at today is the sales pipeline, source, and suspense categories. So we have all of these options here, and we're going to go into each one of those. What I believe is amazing is going in and adding in things like where did the client find out about us from? Is that important to know? I believe so. They say they found us online. We probably need to ask a couple more questions like, what did you search to find us? Or was it on Google? Did you find us on a carrier website? How did you locate us? But I think the first thing that's really important is knowing where our business is coming from and where our leads are coming from. So we want to make sure we have a comprehensive list that's not too overwhelming here in our customized HawkSoft sources. That we're also going to look at the pipeline sub-statuses, and don't get too excitable because we're going to go through a list of these and why I like to use them. But we have leads like commercial unqualified, commercial qualified, personal qualified, and different prospect statuses, fact finding, quoting submission, sales day 1, sales day 7, all the way through refused. It's important to know why they didn't purchase the policy from us or why it was rejected. Maybe the agency disqualified it, or there was some underwriting issues with the policy. That's always important to know as well, because as we go back to look at things we tried to sell in the past, it'll give us a better picture of where to focus our time. The last section that we're going to customize is suspense categories. And this one is huge because if you're looking at your list of suspenses, you can look at those beautiful categories and know what you should be focusing on each and every day. If I see sales items in my task list or in my suspenses, I'm going to know that that's probably a priority, and I'm going to know exactly where it is in my sales pipeline if I'm updating my suspenses as I move along in the sales process. So I'm sure that that was a whole lot of overwhelming information all at once. So let's take a deep breath. Everybody taking their deep breath. And I'm going to open the sales setup manual that you're going to get a copy of because it was not already open. It's thinking, it's trying, it's going to work. And for those of you that were live at our last national meeting, we're representing this one due to technical difficulties. So I practiced and practiced and practiced again to make sure all was working correctly. So if we have more technical difficulties, it's my fault this time. We can't blame the projector. But in this reporting guide, it's going to give you all of these beautiful, it gives you a beautiful photo of me. Oh, shut up. That was at Balboa Island during one of our regionals, if I remember correctly.
It was.
Yes, that's my favorite selfie. It was a good one. Most expensive real estate in America. What a place for a selfie. Gives you a little bit of background on me, and then it gives you how to set up some templates in HawkSoft. So the first thing we're looking at here is, did you know you could customize templates? You really can. I promise you can. Oh, and there it goes. It disappeared. It did not like us customizing the templates. It said no templates for you, Stephen. So what we're looking at is customizing some templates, and this guide is very comprehensive. It's 41 pages of information, but it's just giving you an overview of the things we recommend. So how do you set up some custom templates in HawkSoft, which we did not have as an agenda item today, but I thought was important to include. How do you set up some form letters or text templates in HawkSoft? And then we move on to the setup category. Ooh, it's going to ask for confidential information. Hide your eyes while I type in all of my secret passwords because Google is ridiculous today. So we'll just go back to this because that's where the magic really lies. So we've talked about this much so far: sales pipeline, sources, and suspense categories and how to set those up. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why it's so important to customize these and what we should be tracking. So as we go through and we're adding things, we need to make sure it makes sense for our agency. One of my favorite questions is, well, can you just send me what I should put in there? And as much as I would love for us all to be vanilla and basic and do everything the same way, HawkSoft is the gorgeous unicorn of management systems because we can do just about anything we want with it, however we want. So you need to make sure that you're coming up with what makes sense for your agency, what sources mean something to you. There will be some recommendations in the guide that we'll be sending out later of what to look at. But what we want to make sure that we're really paying attention to is some primary factors. So in the source field, we need to remember to enter all new leads and prospects into HawkSoft immediately. It's important that we do this immediately so we don't forget to do it later. And some people are like, well, we use a rater. Most of your raters will also bridge back, or you can create the information in HawkSoft and then bridge to your rater. And we want to make sure that we're getting the information of where things are coming from. So in here, we can see some of the source field options and some definitions. I think it's also very important that we clearly define for ourselves and our team what the source means to the agency. We had a big problem at one of the agencies I worked at where everybody thought they were getting credit for a fifth car policy because they sold a new policy. Unfortunately, the carrier just automatically issued a fifth car policy when somebody had more than 4 cars. So to us, that was not an additional line of business. That was just what the carrier did. So we had to define those as fifth car and that was a fifth car policy. We also proactively worked on account reviews, meaning we called all of our clients proactively. So we wanted to make sure we were tracking how many cross sells or rewrites we got from the activity of account reviews. So those became a source code in HawkSoft. We could then see how many quotes we did and how many were closed. If we did a broker of record or an agent of record, we put it in and we put the effective date that it was sold. And if we got a referral from a captive agent, we had CAP. It just helped us better track how many captive agents we were getting referrals from. Again, every agency is a little different, so your guide will have a better list of what to look at, but I think that this was a good start and gives you an idea of how to define source code so we can better track our marketing efforts and where we're getting our business and leads from. So the other thing I like to identify is, where do you change the source field? Guess what? You can change it at the client level, or you can change it at the policy level. This is a lovely guide that shows you both of these, both at the client and at the policy level. When we get a new client into the agency, we want to go ahead and enter them in and enter the source of what had them first contact us. And any policies that we're quoting initially would also have the same source code. What we're going to remember is other policies might have a different source code, but we should always leave the client source code alone. That's how we initially got contacts from the client, and at the client level, that one should always stay the same. As different policies come in, those could have different source codes. I would also like to clarify some client and policy statuses. Your agency may use these differently. I'm just telling you how I like to use them. I like a lead to be a person that has not yet requested a quote. It's a purchase lead. It could be my contact list. It could come from a trade show, etc. And when we're in HawkSoft, we would see this right here. What is the status? And the status would be a lead if we didn't have authorization to quote anything or we hadn't quoted anything yet. A prospect is a person that has requested a quote but doesn't have any active policies with the agency. An active status would be a client with at least one active policy, meaning we've issued something for them or it's pending issue. And dead would be a prior client that no longer has any active policies with the agency. So we want to remember, lead, nobody that's requested a quote, it's just some contact information. A prospect is somebody that we're working on quotes for or have quoted in the past. Active is a client with at least one active policy, and dead is a prior client that no longer has any active policies with the agency. So they can't go from lead to dead unless we issue a policy for them first. And again, that's just my preference. Your agency may have different standards. Do not go back and tell your boss that I told you to do it differently, because I have not talked to them and I don't want to get nasty phone calls later. But I think it is nice to have a list that defines what those codes mean for each agency. And this is one of the standards I do recommend for agencies, is just clearly define what does lead, prospect, active, and dead mean to your agency. And then we have policy statuses. The policy statuses are what are going to be shown down here. So status, the status on this one is prospect sales, day one, call one. And we're going to talk about what that means shortly. So up here, we have Glenn Teeter. Teeter, oh my goodness, that's a weird name. And status is dead file because he used to have an active policy with us, but doesn't any longer. But the policy status means that he's a prospect that's called in for another quote, or we reach out to him for a quote, and we're in the sales process. We have things like lead, no communication's been made. We have prospect day one, call one. This is urgent. If I see my policy status is currently set as prospect day one, call one, I want to reach out to this client immediately. It's a hot lead that I need to get on. It is a sales opportunity. If it's day one, call two, it means I've attempted once already today, still did not connect with them, and I'm going to try again the same day. And third attempt in the day. Third attempt in the first day to connect with the prospect. We try to reach out 3 times within 24 hours of any new lead coming in, because we know the first person to connect is normally the person that wins the sale. That's why it's so important that we update these and keep the flow moving. The surprising question that I get asked is, well, if I call them once and they answer, do I still have to call them again? What do we think? No, we've already talked to them. We get to stop. We get to stop moving forward in that, right? We'll then look at some other sources as to, or policy statuses once we get contact with the insured, but some people like to get confused right here. So we like to stop and just clarify, if the client answers at any time during this process, we're going to move on to a different status process. If they don't answer, we continue going. 3 calls in one day. We call again the next day one time, at day 4, at day 5, and then at day 7, 1 week later, is our breakup, where we have a final attempt to connect with the prospect, and then we'll send them a breakup notice if we're unsuccessful in getting a hold of them. So where do we change the status field? You already saw this one. The status can be changed right here, and you'll get the submenus if they're set up correctly in your HawkSoft. The next thing I love is suspense categories. And I know this is a lot of information, so if we need another deep breath moment, it's okay. You're going to get a full printout of this, I swear, and a recording. But what this is, suspense categories should also match our policy status for the sales process. That way, when I look at my suspenses, I can clearly see what activities I need to follow up on without having to go into sales and retention. So a lot of these are very clear and concise in what is to be expected in the handout that we give our team. So with the suspense categories, sales, day 1, call 1, it's going to give us all the steps we need to take when that suspense comes up and what the expectation is from the agent who's handling it. It'll also tell us if no contact made, we create a new log by updating the status to prospect day 1 and suspend for the same day using that same category, sales, day 1, call 2. So we're just moving things along in a systematic manner, updating the source and status. I'm sorry, not the, we're updating the status and suspense category each time. So many S's, people, so many S's. And remember, if you have questions or feedback, please use the Q&A, that's the double bubble, to ask your questions or to participate. So then we're looking at all the rest of the steps, day 1, call 3, day 2, day 4, day 5, all the way through with what's expected for each one. If at any time we get a hold of the client during any of these processes, we're also going to have a suspense category and a status for quote, new business. That would mean the information's received, but the quote cannot be completed over the phone. Or quote, rewrite, existing customer that maybe needs a rewrite, sales day 15 issued and sales day 30 issued. That means we actually issued a policy. We're going to set some suspenses to follow up with the client just to make sure everything's okay and do a double check with them to make sure they're still happy with us and their new policy choice. I feel like it's getting hotter in Arizona currently as we speak with the sun coming in through the window. Where do we update a suspense category? Here you go. It's a screenshot of that beautiful process as well. And then it also gives you step-by-step directions on how to insert a new prospect into HawkSoft. What should we be doing? How should we be using it? This guide is a life changer, my friends. What I really want to get to and what I really want to look at is some of the questions we should be asking all new business that's coming in. Like, how did you hear about our agency? What has you shopping for insurance? Who's your current insurance company? And have you had any accidents or violations in the last 5 years, right? We need to ask about claims, especially in this beautiful market that we're currently in. It's really important that we pre-qualify clients up front and we set an expectation of what they should expect with us. We can also enter information into our system as we go and answer those questions. So what I'm going to do is go through kind of a sales process here in HawkSoft. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen okay. And we're going to pretend like somebody's calling in. So if somebody calls in and I need to insert a new person from the beginning, we use all of our magical HawkSoft tips and tricks and we say, insert new customer. And we figure out which line of business they're calling about. We would then select that from here and click continue. And here's where the adventure gets real. We're going to fill in their name and address. We're going to fill in as much information as we can about them. We're going to pick a producer. We're going to pick a CSR if needed. We're going to pick an office if our office uses that, and a source. So we would ask the client how they heard about us, and they found us on Google. Imagine that. We're then going to fill in name and address by adding a named insured. Ooh, and cap locks is on. Watch out now. We can fill in as much information as possible, adding contact information as well, asking all the questions of the insured. Don't start calling me or texting me random things while I'm presenting, please, because that is my real phone number. But hey, you do you. We're going to fill in address or any other pertinent information. Ooh, New York. New York zip code is 10102. Who knows? I now live in New York. We're going to go to general policy information, and we're going to start filling in the information for what we have. This would be a prospect. I'm going to fill in agent initials if necessary. And again, I'm going to pick the same source. So the client source was Google, and the policy source is going to be Google. And I'm going to set my status. So right now, if I'm quoting, I could go under prospect and pick quote submitting, meaning that I'm currently quoting this, and move on with the rest of the information needed to complete the file. If I wasn't able to quote it over the phone, I can set a suspense for myself to complete this and pick the correct suspense category of something to do with quotes. Look at that, sales, quoting to Stephen, and a priority with a code. Okay. The reason we love the suspense categories as well as the policy statuses is if we go into our reports and we go to our suspenses and I look at my username, I'll be able to go in and look at all of my suspenses, and by category, I'll be able to see what do I need to do. So I have one sale that's a new business that I need to work on, and I have one sale that's a quote that I need to work on. So right here at a quick view, if I'm using my suspense categories, I can see what's more of a priority than another. Right, this client's non-renewing, that might be a priority, but I'm also calling him about some new business. We have a reinstatement, we have a requote. It just helps us better manage our time and our day when we're using these suspense categories correctly. This is another one we like to use, account review. Like if I'm reviewing an account proactively, it would just help me understand how many of those I need to do for the day. The other thing I could do is I could go to sales and retention in the report. And if you have access to it, you would be able to open that up. And in the sales and retention categories, you would be able to see everything in your sales pipeline by status. So we're going to give this a minute.
And Stephen, we have a couple questions when you
Yes.
have a minute.
Let's
there's one in the chat. Can we make prospect fields mandatory in HawkSoft?
Can you make prospect fields mandatory in HawkSoft? Well, let's find out. I think that it's in the general settings of whatever you would require whenever you're inserting a new client.
The source of the lead, etc.
Oh, the source of the lead. Yes, you can make sources. I believe you can make sources mandatory. Let's find out where that's at. Settings. Agency general configuration. It's in one of these settings. I'm horrible with remembering which one. I have to click around a lot. Required field. And then we should be able to pick source as required on entry or a warning. And source is right here at the client level as well for required or just a warning. So
Okay.
if you just want it to warn, it's right here. If you want it required, it's right there. So we went to general configuration and then required field.
Perfect. And then Peggy asked, my agency is still working on a workflow for renewals. Do you suggest creating a new prospect for rewrite quotes?
I would create not a new customer prospect. I would create a new tab for the policy you're requoting so that you know what's happening. So if this auto policy was active and I needed to requote it, I would go in and if I remember correctly, internal insert policy, blah, blah, blah. Or you can also duplicate policies. But I would go in and I would put the code, if it wants to work, under the general policy information. We need to remember to mark the box that says policy was rewritten from prior policy, which will automatically make the source a rewrite. And then you would be able to change your status to whatever was appropriate here. For us under prospect, we used to have a rewrite. I'm sorry, we had a rewrite status as well so that we knew what was happening, but it doesn't look like there's one here. So in the sales pipeline under prospect, I would add one in that says account review rewrite. So we knew that it was happening because of an account review. Did I just make that really way too complicated? I was trying to click buttons and think at the same time.
I'm sure it's fine. Just great, Stephen. If not, we'll hear.
That was like a whole big circle I just talked in.
That's okay.
But yes, we want to make sure that we're either duplicating the policy or creating a new prospect policy, not client, and then marketing as such as a rewrite. If we were to issue the new policy, the one we're canceling, we would then need to mark as canceled rewrite so that it's all tracked correctly in our retention numbers as well.
Okay, thank you. And Cheryl asked, how should we use the suspense priority? Can we default the suspense category to a certain number, i.e. cancellation is priority 1?
That's a great question. Let's find out. I know we didn't used to be able to, but we might now. Nope, it looks like there's no way to associate the category with a priority number at this time. But that's some great feedback. You should go to HawkSoftUserGroup.org and make sure that you put that in the thought or things for them to think about.
HawkSoft.com, actually. Put it in the community page. Yeah, or actually, is it right inside the system? There's a community page.
There's a community
and make the suggestion there. And then the last question, should every employee have access to the suspense and activity report for their own management? Stephen has some thoughts on this, I can tell. Strong opinions?
As I'm not familiar with your agency structure and or privacy policies, I would recommend you refer back to leadership for that question, as I don't know if you are the leader or an employee.
It's an anonymous person, so that's smart.
I am now very delicate in how I answer some of these questions after some calls I've gotten after some of these webinars. I think that employees should be able to access their suspense reports because that's how you should be finding your work. Right? I don't know if you should have access to everybody's. That's going to be up to the leadership level and going to vary greatly based on the culture of the agency.
Okay. Ask the agency owner.
Ask the agency owner or your team lead.
Okay, Peggy has a follow-up question. For some of my carriers, they require information that isn't required in the general policy information. Is there a way to store policy info that doesn't have a box?
I'm sorry. For some carriers, they require information that isn't required in the general policy information. Is there a way to store policy info that doesn't have a box?
So like notes?
Notes could be a good one. I mean, I don't know, like you could log notes with a tag maybe. I don't have a great answer for that because I don't know what kind of information is not available when you're
For
journaling.
example, info on sighting type. Okay, like
Oh,
type of sighting or
okay, let's take a look because I think they recently updated some of that as well. So if we insert a home, let's take a peek-see-poo and find out what it wants. Continue.
and we'll have to
I
do this
think
webinar again next year when everybody's on
on six.
6.
So under the underwriting information on the home policy, I want to say there's a spot for some of that information. There's a lot of the home information that you can fill in, roof type, heat source, burglar. There's also animal 1, animal 2, that's newer. I haven't seen that one before. I would probably just put it under general policy information, like put a note somewhere in there if we don't have, I'm sorry, not under general policy information, but there should be a generic spot for logs in here. Client miscellaneous information is what I was thinking of. Sorry, I would put it in the notes here under client miscellaneous information. And if everybody in the agency is doing it the same way, then you know where to find it. But if there's not a box for it, then I don't have a solid answer other than the notes section.
And we've gotten through all the questions in the chat and the Q&A for now. So if you want to move on to your next section, unless there's any other questions, we'll move on.
So what we were going to do before we moved along is we were going to go back to our sales pipeline. Some of you will have access to this, some of you will not. I cannot give you access. That is only up to your owners/leaders of the agency. So in here is another great way for us to look at this. It's going to show us how many prospects we have and what each stage each one is in. And this is normally at the agency level. So some of you may not have access to this, and some of you might, but I'm just showing it as another tool. So here we have one person. In fact, if I go under prospect and I look at my initials, if we take a step back, I have 8 prospects. If I double click that, it's going to open an actual report and show me everything that I have a prospect for. And I can look at if it gets done opening, I can go and look at the types of policies. I can look at the status. I can look at any of this information here and see where I'm at in my sales process. And I could look and say, oh my goodness, I have one that's a day 1 call one. I better call them immediately. Or, ooh, my favorite, it's the breakup. And if we click this box here, it just kind of puts them in order. It's just a spelling order or alphabetical order. But it helps us just kind of see what's there and what we should be looking at. And that's in the sales and retention report. One of the other reasons, and this is a ninja hack that I will share with you. Some of you will be able to use this and some of you will not. But my ninja hack is this. If you ever want to know how many people you've inserted into HawkSoft, you can run an activity report, filter by log, and simply type the word insert, then apply, and it'll pull up anything that has insert in the log line. So here we can see over the last time period of what I've done, 1.5 years, because this is a dummy database, I can see that I've inserted a personal auto policy, I've inserted a life policy, all the different ways that things have come to me. So I can see exactly what I've inserted in, and it kind of helps me look at this. And then if I go back and see how many policies I've sold, it'll give me a closing ratio. So in sales, one of our favorite questions is, what is your closing ratio? If we're entering all of our prospects into HawkSoft and inserting a line of business for them, we're then able to go back and run a report for any period of time through the activity report and then filter it by log to get that information of how many we quoted. And then through the new business report, we'd be able to see how many we wrote. So the reason I think it is so important, especially in this delicious market that we're in, I've had to come up with lots of creative words for the state of the current insurance marketplace in the United States. But the reason why I think that this is so important is as we're working with our clients, if I have somebody calling in and they're upset about the rate on one of their policies, like Glenn, oh Glenn Coco, if they're upset about the rate on one of their policies and it increased, and I see that we've quoted their home in the past because I have a prospect here still, I can go back and see why we didn't close it and then offer to update that quote and try to get them a cross-sell discount. Or at least open the conversation again. Or if I don't have a market that I might be able to write it in, I can still have the conversation with the client by going through and looking at any other discounts that are available or other things that we've tried in the past. Somebody had the great question of if it's a rewrite, if we're quoting somebody as a rewrite, should we enter it in as a prospect? And my favorite tip that we used to have was if somebody called in to complain about rate and we had already recorded them, we would click over here and it would show us the date. I'd be like, dude, we just recorded this 2 months ago. The market doesn't change that quickly. You need to stay where you're at. Right? Or we can see the last time we quoted something for somebody, especially if we're keeping this up to date. Or maybe they had a driving record issue or some other issues that made it so it wasn't competitive. And in that new quote, we can put those notes. So we can have those conversations with our clients a lot quicker if the information's in HawkSoft. We have to remember if it's not in the system, it didn't happen. So anytime we're doing a requote, anytime we're doing a rewrite, anytime we're quoting an additional line of business for somebody, I feel that we need to be entering it into HawkSoft. We need to pay close attention to the source of where the policy came from, as well as the status. And as we're moving it along, we should be updating that each step of the way. It might seem like double work if you're having to update the status and the suspense category, but I think it's extremely important to do because that's how we know where we're at. And that's how we can better service our clients, especially in this market. So I'm going to log back into my I'm going to log back in here so I can share the rest of this document with you. You'll get a preview kind of for what you're getting and see if there's any other questions as we just tore through a whole lot of content about a sales pipeline and the importance of tracking for retention. Does anybody have any thoughts or need any further clarification on this? Ooh. You can now see my personal email address too. Who doesn't love double-o-dakota@gmail.com? It's actually my husband's email address, but you can send him an email. He'll just delete it or forward it to me.
Someone asked, is there a way to color code suspense categories?
No. That was a simple one.
I did notice, we used to get this question for
Well,
years. I did notice on one of your screens you had very large font type, which you could actually read.
Yeah, well, yes, because you can change in the settings in HawkSoft, you can change your font size. So mine, I think we were demoing it one day and I never changed the default back to whatever. But in the settings for your specific self, you can change color schemes, you can change font type and size. It's quite a magical adventure there. Oh, your account cannot be accessed without this code. Well, that's what I was trying to enter. Thank you. Thank you, dear, whatever you are trying to give me problems.
We have another question.
Yes.
How does it pull or how will it affect reports for rewrites? i.e. if the client source is referral Google and we rewrite from a review, does it affect reports?
It would just affect, like if you're looking at the source of where the business came from, it would affect the report, but I think it's perfectly fine. I would rather know that we were working on a rewrite than not working on a rewrite. Because I think what we tend to do is spend a lot of time shopping because we're more price sensitive than our clients are. And we spin our wheels a lot, recording anything and everything that had a change in premium and we're not tracking it in the system, so we're not seeing our true closing or hit ratio. And when we start really looking at it, we can define, are we spending way too much time? Are we way too sensitive, or are we okay? So I think it's important to still track. So this is the gorgeous document that's 41 pages of adventure you'll receive. Sorry, it took me so long to sign into it. Again, it was talking about some of the templates you can set up and some of the recommended types of templates to use. It's then going to go into my favorite, which is customizing some of these lists. And it's a comprehensive list of all of the categories that I recommend. So for this one, this would be a source code list. This is going to be 2 pages of sources as well as definitions that I recommend. You can make it your own, and just because I said it doesn't mean it has to be true, right? But I think it's a good place to start, and a lot of agents don't have this already. So I wanted to give them a template to start with or something that they could use. I also like looking at like lost soul, like somebody that policies have canceled more than 90 days in the past. If they call us back, I'm going to use in. If I call them, I'm going to use out. None, I hate none. None should never be used. We always need to figure out where the source is. Is it a replacement home, etc. So this is going to be 2.5 pages of sources. I updated it a little bit. We then go in and say, how do we update suspense categories? And it gives you the step-by-step of how to do it. If you don't have admin privileges, you may not be able to update these. And please do not update them without the owner or leadership knowing what you're doing without prior permission. But this is the step-by-step by how. And this is my sales process that I used for years that I find to be very effective and efficient. And it gives you all the reasons for each category and why you should be using them and what you can do during that time. I think Amelia's favorite is the breakup. She loves breaking up with clients. She's like, no love for you no more. I've now tried 8 times to reach you. And you are not there for me. I can give you my love no more. I'm taking it all away. No more love for you, right? I like to think of it kind of like the first sales call. Sales day 1 call 1 is the first date. It's the blind date. We're going to see if we can get along. If you don't talk to me, then I'm going to have to call you again and see what happened, because I'm still sitting at the bar waiting for you to pay for my drink. The third time, I'm now paying the bill, the bar tab, and I'm not happy because I got a fancy drink because I thought you were paying and you never showed up, right? Day 2, it's like, hey, boo, seeing if you're still alive, should we get back together again? Then I'm like, well, there's other fish in the sea, but at day 4, I don't want to sound desperate, but I'm going to try again. And we go all the way through this till we're like, you didn't return my call. I'm breaking up with you. It's you, not me. It also gives us the categories for new business and rewrite. It'll also give us the, if we issue a policy, a 15-day follow-up and a 30-day follow-up. And again, guys, this is just a step-by-step guide of how I like to handle sales and the sales pipeline, how to set up some of those templates. And then at the end is a lot of reporting and how to use it. And it's all the things we reviewed very, very quickly.
Stephen, somebody asked if you could show where you increase the font size.
Yeah, let's figure that out.
I told
together.
you, somebody always has that question, and
I'm like, let's figure that out.
You would think at this point I would know, but
like
Cassie said she got it.
Okay, I was like, I know it's in settings. Your individual. Because I have a long note open. Like, why won't settings open? Settings.
But now you have to demo it in case somebody else was wondering.
Right, computer specific settings, if I remember correctly.
Andrea says it's under view.
Maybe my taskbar.
View fonts.
Ooh, right
got
here
lots
in the
of
top
help.
blue bar, view, and then fonts.
Yeah.
So there's data text, prompt text, and log text. You can make them all different, or you can reset them all to whatever. If you click on modify, it'll give you all the selections for the font name, like Comic Sans. Who doesn't want all their log notes in Comic Sans, right? Size, strikeout, underline, bold, colors, scripts, whatever makes you happy here. make it a little circus, because why not? So you can modify everything again as view. Thank you for the hot tip, view and font. You can also change the color of your screens, light blue, dark blue, or dark. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns today?
And Stephen, you're going to send me that link to that document, and then I will include it in an email that I send out to everybody when we have the recording rendered.
I appreciate that. If you have any other questions, feel free to send me a message. Otherwise, I hope that you learned something from this magical time we've spent together.
You have another question.
Oh, yes.
Andrea asked, is there a report to show how often employees log into HawkSoft?
No, but the activity report would show how often they log things into HawkSoft. Was that a good answer? I don't think there's a way to know who's logging in.
I mean,
it was kind
it's
of punny.
But if I'm in HawkSoft,
it's a workaround.
Yeah.
If I'm in HawkSoft, I should be documenting everything I'm doing. So I should be able to just run the activity report, and you'll see that at 7:50 a.m. I was in the system, and Glenn Teether and I had some fun. At 10:30 today, Stephen Harrington and I had some fun. But
and we'll find out if this is something we're changing for HawkSoft 6.
Yeah, I was thinking the same
I feel
thing.
like there might. I feel like
be
this might be
something that you could do in HawkSoft 6.
That's above my pay grade. I
Yeah.
am on a need to know basis with HawkSoft 6.
Yeah, and I think some of those, like the suspense categories and whether you can highlight them and change them color or create default days, that's going to undergo quite a change in HawkSoft 6 and become tasks as opposed to suspenses. So I think we'll see some of those things coming through as well once we're on 6.
And I'm sorry, I stopped sharing my screen. Do we have any last minute questions for HawkSoft?
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
All right, then Miss Jennifer, I will get this over for you immediately so you have and I don't forget.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and thanks, Stephen, for presenting today. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, if everybody needs anything
thanks,
else,
Jennifer, for setting it up.
Great. Thank you, guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar, and we will send you out an email today probably with that additional information.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys.